Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Fundamentals and Practical Leadership webinar series for new and emerging leaders. This is session 1, Your Reason to Lead. My name is Maria Sanchez-Keene. I am from the Center for Organizational Effectiveness, and we are glad that you're able to join us today. Just a little bit of orientation with respect to our webinar tool today. You do have a variety of ways in which we can interact. The first thing, if you look at your console, you'll see that there's a place for questions here. So you can actually click on this and then you'll be able to add questions, any questions that you might have. We'll be monitoring those. There is an audio, hopefully you can hear me, and you are all muted just for sound clarity. But if you raise your hand as in on your console, if you click on that little icon that is a hand, we'll be able to see that. And as well, we'll have a lot of interactive polls as we go through this afternoon in terms of the 2 webinars, the first one, and then we'll take a small break and we'll move into the second webinar. So we are the Center for Organizational Effectiveness. We work with nonprofit, charitable, and public organizations. You see our why there on the page: to create greater good for our world by strengthening organizations, communities, and systems to better serve their people. Today with us, we have Carrie Selkirk, who is the Senior Consultant with the Center. She'll be doing Module 2. Kathleen Schwartz is our Communications and Research Associate, and she is monitoring the questions and the chat. So if you have anything and all the technology, so you can certainly draw any attention to that, and she'll be monitoring that. And I think Gerda is also joining us today. So the first webinar is about your why. Why do you want to be a leader or a manager? Why do you want to be in leadership and management? What is it about that that fits with your personal values? What's the difference between management and leadership? And we really wanted to spend a significant amount of time on this aspect of your why, so that you can have a deep understanding of how your why connects to your leadership, and so that we have clarity related to that as we think about the tools and the practical ways in which you might be called into leadership and management. So we do want to start with just getting a sense of who is with us today. Oops. So a little bit about you. So you will see on your console this area that's called handouts, and on it you'll see a thing that's called links to polls, and I see that some of you have already found it. And when you click on that, you'll see something that looks like this. If you click anywhere on that, it should take you to a page where you can start filling in the first question here. So recognizing that you may cross sectors, with what sector do you primarily identify? And again, this just gives us an idea of who's with us and gives you a good sense of the people that are participating in it today. So I'll give you a moment to complete that. There's about 96 of us all together. So once you've completed your portion, you've checked off whichever one it is, I'll ask you to minimize that and then get back to the screen where you were for GoToWebinar, and you should be able to see an interactive poll that's telling us where people are coming from. So again, we'll just give a sec for that. So we see as it's being completed that we have good representation from across many sectors: children's mental health and addictions, employment training and small business support as well, primary care, community support services is with us, justice, so many different sectors. Okay, so you may want to go back to that handout, that page for the next poll. So it will be part of your browser at this point. And so the next question is this, similar to how we started the last webinar on leadership in COVID, the time of COVID-19. How long have you been in any form of leadership position? So I'm not yet, but I aspire to be 1 year or less, 1 to 3 years, 4 to 10, longer than I have fingers to count on. Good, so that's coming quick. Just give it a moment. Excellent. Okay, so we see here that we have many aspiring leaders, so welcome to you. We have a good section of those who've been in leadership for 1 year or less, 1 to 3, 4 to 10, and those who have been here in leadership for many years, and welcome to them as well. A reminder that this is for new and emerging leaders, and hopefully affirming to you as a leader if you've been in leadership for a while. All right, so the last question as we start this part of our webinar is this. When did you know that you wanted to be a leader? So a bit harder. So for some of us, it was like, yeah, when I was 4, I knew I was going to be a leader. For some, it might be when someone called it out in me. For some, it might be, you know what, I just kind of grew into the position. So this one, you just kind of answer in text format, and then we'll see how answers come up. So since I was a kid, when you were ready for something new, early in my career. I've always wanted to be a leader. In high school. In the last 5 years. Always wanted to be. From a young age. I grew into the position. Yeah, it comes so differently for so many of us. When I was young in sports. Yeah, it happened organically. You kind of grew into it. Within the first year of my direct care work experience. It happened over time. Since high school. Logical next steps. Yeah, so interesting. As we think about our why, when we think about, when did I know, or when did I have a sense that this was something that I really wanted to do and really nurture? And again, it comes at it from a variety of perspectives, as you see coming up on the screen. I was being gently encouraged by other leaders soon after my career started. All right, well, thank you. That's helpful just to get a sense of where we're at as a group. So I'm going to move that off the screen, and we'll come back to it in a little bit. All right, so the why question. So some of you, there we go. Some of you might be familiar with Simon Sinek's work, Start with the Why. And it's not a new concept in that for many people who've been around leadership for a long time, it may have been described as your mission statement or your core purpose statement, but it really continues to come up in leadership theory and leadership books around this idea that it's really valuable for us to have a deep understanding of why we do what we do. And our leadership stems from that. So it's connected to what we believe is significant about us and what it is that we want to do in the world, and then how leadership flows from that perspective. So we're going to talk a little bit about this today, and we're going to dedicate a big portion of this webinar today. Partly because when we were putting the webinar series together and when we were speaking to executive directors, it came up quite a bit. It came up as something really important. What we hear from leaders is, from executive directors is, we really think we need to spend time nurturing leadership within our organizations, but we're stretched. We may not have internal resources to develop the tools or to develop the actual series, but we know it's important. Innately, we know it's important. And as we went through that with them, they spoke more and more about the importance of understanding your why and then connecting it to leadership. So what I want to do with you today is actually share a little bit about my why statement and how that has really informed me as a person and as a leader. And so it was actually when I was 24 years old, and it was a course that I was taking. And I was kind of in the same situation as the aspiring leaders in our group are today, where I was learning a lot about it. And one of the exercises was to develop my mission statement. Now, over the years, it has evolved. At 24, I didn't have children, for example. But it is something I didn't know at 24 how foundational this statement would become for me as a person in my career and as a leader. I feel a little bit vulnerable sharing it with you because mission statements are quite personal. But of course, we thought we needed to lead by example. So here it is. My why. Knowing we belong to an everlasting story of love. So in essence, that's like my fundamental why, is that I believe in goodness. I believe in a world filled with love and a world that we have to create toward love. So knowing we belong to an everlasting story of love, may my life be an expression of this as I make relationships the focal point of my life. May these relationships be built on love, passion, intimacy, honesty, integrity, laughter, and joy, qualities I desire for myself. May these qualities be truest in my marriage, with my most intimate companion, with my family and friends. May I be a mother whose actions, words, intentions, and desires lead my children to realize that they are part of this everlasting story of love. May my life be an expression of this as I work with others to co-create a world of justice, peace, and love, using all my gifts for the service of others, especially the least in our world. May I lead from a place of servant leadership, celebrating when others say, we did it ourselves. May I take time to exercise, rest, relax, celebrate, and nurture myself. And may our home be a place of welcome and hospitality where others are reminded that they too belong to this everlasting story of love. So as I was preparing this for the webinar, I happened to run it by my husband, Dan, and my daughter, Monica. And they have a way, it's good that you do this and run these by your family members, because they can kind of put you back in your place. And so my husband said, well, you know, it's your mission statement, so you're working towards it, so that's good. And my daughter said, well, I like how it says may and not will, as in I know that this statement, while true and aspirational, isn't necessarily the way I live my life every day. But it's certainly something that anchors me and helps me to be reminded of what it is that I want to be in the world. It tells me my why. And so as we go through today, I want you to start thinking about what is my why? What is it that I want to think about? And perhaps you have a personal why statement already. And so this will be more about refreshing it and looking at it again and determining whether it continues to tell you about your why. So I want to ask you just a few questions in terms of what you think about this idea. So we're going to go back to the polls. So as a reminder, you go back to your browser where we opened up the questions, just a few questions so that I get a sense of what you think about all this. So the first one is, do you have a written why, core mission, core purpose or mission statement? So no, yes, or I'm in the process of creating one, just so that I have an understanding. Okay. Okay. So a stretch for many of you is to really start thinking about, should I create one? What would be the benefit and value? And that's part of what I want to talk about today is really, so you write one and then what? So next question. Thanks for that. Next question is this. There's two more questions in this section. So how would you see this as valuable for you? And you might say, I don't, but how would you if you do? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Helps me keep focused, anchors me. Writing anything down holds accountability and helps gain clarity. It would guide my daily interactions. Yes, it is my guiding star. Helps through the tough days. Keep me focused, accountable. Yeah, that's such an important one. Keeps me focused on what's important, particularly in our lives that are filled with urgency. Yes, good place to reflect, center myself. Yes, accountability. Stay on track. Focus. Yeah, good. I'm not certain. Yeah, what would be the value of this? We'll talk a little bit more about it to see if it helps with goals, ways to keep you feel grounded. Yeah, provides a guide for aspiring leader. Anchor to bring me back to my purpose. Keep me focused on my goals. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so I'll move that out of the way. Oh no, one more question. Sorry. Next one. What 3 words do you think you might include in your why, core purpose, or mission statement? So if you think about it, it's like, if I don't have one, or if you do, what words are already there? Empathy. Support, encourage, inspire, balance, give, growth. And sure, yeah, it takes time to do this work, and I'll talk a little bit about that, the importance, if you're interested in doing this, how it does take time. And so being put on the spot like this is not good for some. Spiritual people, self-care, integrity, inspire, leadership, compassion, inspirations, growth, support, selfless, community good, impactful, mentor, awesome words, servant, kindness, inspire, empower, authentic, fun, transformative. So many good words. Thank you. Yeah, so that's the start, when you start thinking, yeah, what am I about? What is my why? And beginning to articulate it, even in the words that we're hearing now. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to move that off to the side and continue with the presentation. So this is a really kind of nice, as I was saying, inspirational statement that you can write while you're by the water and all those good things. And if we think about the canvas of our life, it kind of looks more like this, right? This is my reality, and I know the reality of so many people that we work with. It is about all of the home stuff, right? The laundry and all the forms that have to get filled in, and the school buses and the tears, even as they get into teenage years. And then, of course, there's the work and the processes for us, and the people, and the presentations. And there's just so much happening that sometimes, as you mentioned in your responses, what a why statement does for us is that it anchors us. It cuts through this. It reminds me. It helps me to say, okay, as I go through this day-to-day rut, which it sometimes feels like, what is it that holds me? What is it that holds me together? As I think about leadership and my leadership when I work with organizations, what is it that I want to model? How do I want to do the work? What are the values that I bring to the work that I want to ensure that are resonating with the organizations that I work with, but also have a sense of deep purpose that connects with my why. So I just wanted to, give you a sense that while on paper it looks kind of this antiseptic and this formal and this real, this is where it happens. And this is probably what Dan and Monica were trying to tell me. It's like, yeah, that's all nice and good, Mom, but in the everyday, how do we live it out? In the everyday of leadership, in the everyday of our work, how can we lead through these pieces that we're talking about? So that's the context of trying to anchor everyday living and everyday leadership with a statement that helps us to put it all into perspective. And so I want to talk a little bit about how you create a why statement, because again, we think it is so essential. And I know many of the executive directors we talked about said it was pretty important to help people understand their why. So I want to say that there is no need to wait until you are in formal leadership. So for most of you who are aspiring leaders, this is a great time to do it. What is your why in terms of leadership? What is it that you would bring and what you want to be about? And I also want to say it's never late to write one, never too late to write one. So that if you don't have one and you've been a leader for a while, this might be an interesting exercise for you to do as well. Want to emphasize that leadership springs from your core identity. So I don't believe so much in having your why statement for you and then having a leadership why statement. I do think that they intermingle and connect deeply together. And so what I'd encourage you to do is to have an element of leadership within your why statement. And again, if you have one already, it might be looking at it again and saying, what did I say about leadership that I might want to add about how I want to be a leader in the world? And it really articulates in many ways why you want to get up in the morning. And so as we think about this reality and really challenging times, and I know that we've all had them, um, it really does. My why anchors me and helps me to figure out why it is that I want to get up in the morning. And mostly I think about the people that I know that are getting up that have the same purpose as I to make a greater, a better world. And they get up every day, even through tough times. So really important points for us to keep in mind as we think about why we'd want to create one and when we can create one. And so I want to share a little bit about the process. Again, this is one process. We have many of them for you to think about at the bottom of the slides that you'll be receiving. Excuse me. You'll see a variety of resources, and they're all ways in which you can write a mission statement. So I'm going to share one. And it is one that I used, and it's also one, as I've taught on this, that I've presented and have received some really beautiful mission statements back that in terms of marking and so forth. So one way to do it. I want to say that it takes time. So this is hard if you want to do it authentically and for it to be meaningful to you to kind of cram at the last second. You can do it and you can hand it in and it's not a big deal. But if you want it to be meaningful for you, it does take time. I want to share how, when I was 24, how that happened for me. So I was taking a course and I was asked to do this why statement. And I, at that time, thought that it would be really valuable for my partner to do it as well, for Dan to do it. And now you have to understand, Dan is a Irish Canadian, happy-go-lucky, football, beer drinking kind of guy. So writing a mission statement and me saying, hey, let's write our mission statement wasn't necessarily in his idea of fun. However, he took me up on it because I offered that we go to a beach, that we bring great food and some beverages, and that we, sit kind of apart in a quiet place of the beach and really have, deep dialogue about what's important to each of us. And it turned out to be a really amazing day for us. And it was a day. It took us a day to really sit and, obviously it wasn't like we talked like about it all the time, but we created the space in which we could really think about our why and what we wanted to do. And as I mentioned to you, I didn't anticipate that it would have the effect that it did for the rest of my life. That statement that you saw, it didn't look quite like that as we started, but it certainly has been important to me. And I'll share ways in which we continue to weave it into our everyday life as we go forward. So a process. Invite you to first start by considering and writing all of your roles. And so think holistically about every role that you play in this world. And that is just a helpful list to think about, okay, what might I write about this in terms of my why and how I want to be in the world? And then you might want to create another list, which is your values. So you can brainstorm those and then maybe select top 3 to 5 values that you think these are my non-negotiables. No matter where I work, no matter how I'm involved in leadership, these are non-negotiables for me and I want to lead from them. I want to be in an organization that espouses to them and I want to be about them in every part of my life. So you create your roles and you think about your values and then you breathe, relax, and imagine in some quiet time. So this is where we closed our eyes on the beach and laid back. And you imagine that you are celebrating your 80th birthday party. And so this is like a guided meditation. So at your 80th birthday party, you imagine an amazing celebration where people from all your walks of life are there. Imagine the party in as much detail as you can. So who is there, the setting, the decorations, the food, the music. So if you've done guided meditations, you know that the more you go into the detail, the more profound the experience can be. And then when you're ready, you imagine individuals from your life standing there and one by one sharing who you are and how you've impacted their life, perhaps how you've impacted the community, the world. And imagine you have fulfilled your roles and your leadership roles to your fullest potential. So you go and you say, yeah, I did it. And what are people saying now? And as you come out of your guided meditation, you then look at your roles and you think about the tribute words that you heard, about the difference that you made. And that now becomes the makings of a mission statement. So you have your values, you have your roles, you have words that you hope people will say as you celebrate your 80th birthday to then begin to write a mission statement. Your why statement or your mission statement, there's really no right or wrong to this. I've seen some that are really pithy and amazing, as well as really lengthy ones that are amazing, some that are done by roles, some that are done by values, as long as it speaks to you and it brings you back to your center and it ignites a passion for living and for leadership, you've done it right. And so again, there's other examples of how you might do this. Yeah, I encourage you to take time. You may have time during these times to do it, you may not, but take time to reflect if you really want to enter into this really important part of leadership that sometimes we forget about, but that anchors the work that we do. So then you might say, okay, great, I write it. And what we don't want to do, like we don't want to do with strategic plans, is have them somewhere where you dust it off, I don't know, every year or every 5 years, and you say, yeah, what was it that I wrote? How is this important to me? So what I want to do is share an example of how it's become a living document for me. And again, this might not work for you. It certainly is not the way that Dan does it. He's got his own process for it because we're such different people. But I'll share this one in the hope that it might give you some ideas of how you make this a living document for yourself. So I have this quadrant that I use. I've had it for years and years. In the first part, you'll see here, it talks about my why or my mission statement, which is what I just read. And then once a year, so January 1 is a pretty sacred day for me. This is what I do every year. I reflect on the year past, and then I look at the year ahead, and I think about this year. So you'll see in the what I have for this year. 2020 is a year of vision and hope. Well, that was easy because it's 2020, so vision was easy. And hope. We've had some hard years as a family, so this was an important year for us. And so we think about the years of celebration. That was what we talked about. So we have my daughter's wedding, another daughter who is graduating, my son who's also graduating, and we're celebrating 20 years for CfOE. So you can imagine how this is going now during these times, but we're trying to figure that all out. But it was a year of celebration. And then because it was 2020, I wrote a little statement about the decade where I really wanted to focus on revitalizing the earth, community, and the human spirit. And then I talked about, okay, well, what gifts do I bring? This is the stuff I do every year. So this year I wrote experience, wisdom, hope, and presence. Then I wrote what I need. And what I need is to move away from just a to-do list, which you might be laughing at, given that this looks like a to-do list. But I know that that is my Achilles heel. I know that I can just get driven and just think about checking boxes. And so you'll note that in my mission statement, it is almost the reverse of those pieces that are there. So you move towards presence, celebration, joy, and then I want to hold center. And I mean 2020 be wonderful and celebratory and meaningful and healing. And then I write my yearly goals about how I'm going to stay fit physically, spiritually, and mentally, focus on relationships, celebrate, reach out, and balance. So I've got statements underneath those as well. And then on an ongoing basis, sometimes weekly, it doesn't always happen, trust me, but as regularly as I can, I think about, well, what went well this week? What didn't go as well? What are the priorities for this week? And what are some ways that I can continue to focus on my goals and tackle the priorities ahead? What I find is that weekly planning allows me to look at a chunk of time that is doable, and it allows me to be a bit more intentional about what it is that I want to focus on. And sometimes it's about, I really want to call a certain client that I know is struggling, a person. I really want to develop and read this article that I didn't read yet. I want to spend time with one of my children who I know is struggling a little bit. Whatever it might be, a week at a time allows me to put those things in. And I don't always get to them. In fact, I often don't, but at least I'm attempting to. So this is my attempt at trying to weave my why and have it become very much a part of my everyday life. So then you might ask, how do we begin to translate that into the work that we're talking about in terms of leadership? So what you could do, and what I've done in the past, is you take similar quadrants to look at them from the lens of your team. And again, for you as aspiring leaders, you might be leading a project, or you might be thinking about a time in which you were leading, or a way in which you hope you were to lead, or can lead. So what you would do is, using the same thing as you would type, you would write out your team's why or core purpose. So always it has to be aligned to the vision and the mission of the organization. But it doesn't mean that you can't take your team and say, okay, so how does our little picture of our team fit into the bigger picture of our organization? And this process of writing your team's why might be very helpful. So it might look really different for the administrative team at Addiction Services Thames Valley. And it might look really different at the law team at a child welfare agency, or the intake team at children's mental health sector. So you can take the vision and mission of your organization and then lead your team through a process of, what is our deep why? How do we do this work and do it well? And it can be a really reigniting work to do with your team. And then you might once a year think about leading your team through this reflection questions that I have there. So 2020, what is it that we want for 2020? Never too late to do it. What are the gifts, strengths, and skills that we bring into 2020? What needs do we have? So what, as we look back at the year past, were we really struggling with anything? Was it conflict? Was it attendance? Was it motivation? Was it that we're burnt out? What needs do we have that we want to really take care of and tend to in this upcoming year? And what hope do we have from our team and how it connects to the rest of the organization and the rest of the system? So some reflection questions, and then align to your organization's mission and strategic plan. What are your goals? And we know that some of them are given to you, right? You have certain targets that you have to meet. The strategic plan will certainly be informing that, but you may also within that have some other elements that you want to add to your team's work. And then we call, instead of ongoing reflection, we might call this continuous improvement. And there we want to talk about what went well, what didn't go so well, what are the priorities for next week, and what are some ways we can continue. And you might say, yeah, we're going to do that on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis. This is an example for you to use and think about, how do I, as a leader, weave a why into the work that I do for my team to stay connected and to remember our core purpose in the work that we do. So just an example of how we do that. All right. So I just want to I know I talked for a long time. What I want to do is just get a sense from you. Again, if we go back to our the polls, the questions, do you have any comments, thoughts, or questions? And we'll just pause there so that I get a sense of where you're at. I'll answer this. Oh, how about I activate the poll? Hopefully it's working. There we go. Yes, you will receive, thank you. The chart, we can share it with you both in Word as well as within the PowerPoint. A lot to think about. Solid framework, yeah. Yeah, it is a lot to think about. I think that is really valid to just pause and think about, why do I do it and can I write that? Oh, that's such an interesting question. I wonder how different my mission statement might be now versus creating it before the pandemic that we are in now. So valid. And I'm telling you that it's amazing how going through mine year over year, how some things just stay true no matter what. And then as my life has grown and I've grown as a person, how other elements have changed. Yeah, the framework can anchor a team and bring it together. Absolutely. For me, it's a tension between the intent and action. I have a lot of intent to do this work. Being able to have the authentic space to do it is very difficult. Oh my goodness, I hear you. I hear you. I'll share a few tips on that. One is I find Sunday evening a really good time to kind of pull my week together and then try to plan for the week ahead. In my busiest moments, I don't do that at all. I wish I could, but I know that when I anchor on Sunday evening, it tends to help me a bit, if that's helpful. Something I haven't considered before. Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll continue as we move forward with the presentation. So for those of you, there is a ability to get a certificate out of this webinar series. For those of you who are in that stream, if you're thinking, I don't know if I'm on that stream, speak to your lead in the organization, in your organization. If you're thinking, I want to be, that's not a problem. We can make that happen as well. So in essence, for this webinar, what you would need to do is actually develop your why statement or refresh it if you already have one, and then reflect on how it aligns with the why or the mission of your organization. So we want you to be able to say, here is who I am and my why, and then how it connects to the why of your organization. Sometimes it does, and sometimes there's pieces that don't, but at least being able to share and reflect on that. And then share what the process of creating or refreshing your why statement was like for you. So we're looking at a max of 3 pages for this part of the certificate. And I just wanted to share that with you as we close off this section of this session. Okay, so what I want to do for the last part of this webinar now is to really start thinking about the rest of the sessions. So here we're talking about the why, and for the rest of the sessions, we're going to start talking about the really practical tools for new and emerging leaders related to both leadership and management. So the first thing we want to do is just think about what is the difference between leadership and management. So it's really important for us to think about that it is not about managers here, it's about management and about leadership in being a leader or a team lead or a coordinator, director, manager, whatever your title might be, or not. And you still need to develop these for your work and then as you are aspiring leaders. It's important for you to know that both are really important, leadership and management. And often we tend to talk more about leadership, but management is as essential to be a good leader. Both are really significant parts. And you'll notice as I go through some of these definitions that you may have a more natural tendency toward one than the other. And so that might tell you where it is that you need to spend some time in terms of professional development, because we tend to go with our professional development towards the things that we love, which is amazing. But we also, as leaders, need to be thinking about what are the areas that I need to be really developing as I move forward. So what I want to do, again, just back to our polls, is think about, oh, and I think I lost it there for a minute. Think about, so I just have to, here we go, this question here. So what do you see as the difference between management and leadership? Give you a moment. Leaders are more inspirational. Yeah, leadership is something I can do without being in a formal leadership position. Leadership inspires. Yes, management is tactical, leadership is strategic. Good definition. Leadership strategic long-term, leading through example, setting company culture. More aspirational, management more tactical. Inspiring versus doing. Yes, good point. I don't believe you have to be in a manager role to be a good leader. Absolutely. Management is about accomplishing goals and tasks. Management is a title, leadership is a role, a way of living. Beautiful. Official job title. Anyone can be a leader. Okay, interesting. Interesting. Okay, so what we want to talk a little bit about today is that, in fact, to be a leader, you need both skill sets, a managing skill set and a leading skill set in order to be really effective. Management, dealing with problems, leadership, coaching, mentoring, guiding. Leaders coach. Leadership is an approach, management is day-to-day tasks, absolutely. Showing versus telling. What's really interesting is, and I don't have a poll for this, but really interesting would be how many of you in leadership have to do both, because it's so easy if all we needed to do was inspire, although that's very hard work to do as well. But so many of us have to do the other aspect of managing as we go through. Mentoring, guiding, organizing work. Yeah, you've got it. So let me just share some definitions, but you've got some really good sense of it already. I'm gonna move that over. Here we go. So just step by step here. So leadership fosters the vision, management requires tenacity. So the questions, no matter whether you're a formal leader or not, the questions as you enter work is, how do I foster and get my team excited about the vision of where we are going? And how do I continually work toward meeting the goals set before us? So sometimes when we are in a position that isn't the top leader position or executive director, board, or senior leaders, we think, well, they're left to do all of the leadership, I just have to manage. And I go into my team just thinking, okay, here's what I have to do. But what I'm here to say, and what I think the series will show us, is that in fact, you also have to be the one that fosters the vision as well as the tenacity piece. So in fact, sometimes in that middle management role, you have to develop both, because both are required as you take the lead from your key leaders. So leadership inspires change, management manages the transformation. So important here. How can I inspire my team toward the changes required? And in this time, that would be the case. How do you continue to inspire, especially as we're chugging along now in this reality? And then how do I develop a plan to transform my team toward the change? So when something foundational is happening in terms of a change within your organization, if you are a leader in a leadership role or an informal leader, you need to also be thinking about, how do I continue to inspire the change with my team, and how do I manage that transformation? Leadership uses imagination, management requires specific, really true. So we need to have a really bold vision of where we're going, our why as we fit into that. And then I also need to get down to the specifics, that Excel spreadsheet that tells me exactly what it is that needs to occur in order to get where I need to go. Leadership needs to think broadly and systematically. Management requires concrete data. So both the skills are, how do I think about our work as a team, or my work within the system of my organization? And for many of us in the work that you're doing with people with great complexity, you're no longer seeing someone that only is in your organization. You're talking about the system of all your partners and all the policy that comes down and all the changes that we're seeing in so many of the different sectors. So you need to have a deep sense of that, and at the same time then be able to say, okay, but what's my concrete data that tells me whether or not we're moving in the direction that we need to move in? And a final one, and there's many of these, but these are kind of the top ones that came to us. Leadership requires the ability to engage, and management requires the ability to accomplish. And sometimes it's hard to do both. And so in your teams, you may be able to say, okay, I know that there are some people that in my team that are better at engaging, or that are better at accomplishing. That's the beauty of a team, is that you can use the skill set of everybody. I know also that in a team, there could be individuals who are really leaning towards needing a lot of engagement, and some who will be leaning a lot towards accomplishment. And it is about trying to carry that tension between those. So when is it that we really need to be about engagement, and when is it that we really need to be about accomplishment? How do we balance that? As a leader, it is your job to think about, when do I need to be fostering the vision? When do I need to be thinking about tenacity? How do I inspire change at the same time as manage and accomplish the transformation? How do I nurture imagination and also have the specifics at the same time? How do I think about the system and think broadly? and then also have really concrete data with respect to this. How is it that I keep my team engaged and at the same time make sure that I'm meeting the targets and the deliverables? Sometimes, depending on the person that you are, you will lean more one way than the other. And part of good leadership is being able to read, when does my team need what? How do I shift my leadership to understand what they need and deliver on what it is that they need in order to be able to continue, both from the perspective of relationship as well as the perspective of delivering on the product as we go forward. So good. So some definitions, and again, we'll be going through a lot of this as we go through the conversations in the next sessions as we go forward. So what I want to do before we finish, what we'd like to do is take a 10-minute break. So I want to finish my session by 12:50, so that we have a 10-minute break so you can go and stretch, go to the bathroom, grab something, and then come back right for 1 o'clock when Carrie will start her session. So what I want to do is just introduce that topic to you. So session 2 is about what changes for you when you become a leader. This is actually a really important point here, because many of you are in that space of aspiring leadership or really early in your leadership. And that's what this whole series is about. And it's really important for you to have an understanding that things do change when you move into leadership. And for those of you who've been in leadership for years, you probably can speak very specifically to the time when you really notice that change. So I wanted to share a little bit about my experience early on in my career when that happened to me in a very significant way. And so I was 25 years old, and I was a part of a team that but felt a lot like the team that you're seeing on your screen right now. We all we worked well together. We huddled well. We did our team effectively. We had an amazing leader, and that leader suddenly left. And at that point, I was doing my thing. I was loving what I was doing and growing as a team player. And the leadership position came up, and I was tapped on the shoulder to apply for it. And at that time, I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to apply, but I'm not going to get it. I just had a real clear sense that this wasn't going to be my job. There was someone else on our team that I thought was going to get it, but I went for it. And I ended up getting it. And so I really didn't have much preparation on the shift that happened as I took on that leadership position. And Carrie's going to really dive into some of these important pieces for you to be aware of as you're a new leader or even changing in a leadership position within an organization. And so some of the things that I experienced that I was not prepared for was, first of all, a change in my relationship with my teammates. I just assumed that everything would continue the way that it always was. Like, I was friends with these people. I got along with them really well. And the second I became a leader to them, our relationship changed. And they saw me as the person that they were accountable to. And I wasn't prepared for that change at all. So being prepared for some of those shifts that happen with respect to relationships. The person that thought that he was going to get the role was probably twice my age. And I now had to manage and lead him. And he was pretty bent out of shape about the fact that he didn't get the role, and made my life very, very difficult. Eventually, I had to let him go. And so I wasn't prepared for anyone being insubordinate, not listening to me, challenging my leadership, pushing my boundaries, and then the experience of actually having to determine that this was someone that I needed to let go. So these are things that happen as we move into either your first leadership or a change in leadership, that the more that you're aware of them and the more that you think about the skills that you need to manage these, the better off that you are. So I know that you will really enjoy the next part of the series with Carrie as we think about what changes for you when you become a leader, the expectations that your organization has, the expectations that you need to have on yourself, and the expectations that you will have for your team and that the team will have for you. So thank you. It is now 12:50. So we are going to take a 10-minute break. Now, what I ask you to do is don't touch your webinar equipment at all, because we'll be able to just continue from here, but certainly step away. We're going to take a pause and just put up a screen, and we'll start right back up at 1 o'clock. Thanks very much, everybody.